Welcome to Something Came from Baltimore. I'm your host, Tom Gouker. Remember that Something Came from Baltimore is a jazz, blues, and R&B podcast and radio show, and it's not really about Baltimore. Back in 2018, I had the opportunity to speak with the alto sax man, Owen Broder, for his work on Heritage and the second recording of The Cowboys and the Frenchmen. And now I got him back on Zoom to talk about his current recording called Hodges, Front and Center Volume 1, which has a release date of October 14, 2022. The world moves so quickly, and we're so glad to catch up with Owen Broder. You know, if Billy Strayhorn is Duke Ellington's right-hand man, then Johnny Hodges is Duke's left-hand man. Front and Center pulls out some rarities and focuses on the brilliance that is Johnny Hodges. And we are going to talk about the career of Johnny Hodges along with the album with Owen Broder. But first, we have to take care of some of that housekeeping business. If you like the Beatles Come To America is coming back. Make sure you subscribe because you don't want to miss a thing, and the link is in that show notes. You like jazz? Something Came from Baltimore has podcast friends from Kansas City and Texas. Listen for their show promos and check out the links that are in the show notes. You will be very impressed. Cash App and Venmos is in. We say yes. And Patreon is no. Check out that information also in the show notes. Owen Broder, welcome to Something Came from Baltimore.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks for having me.
Great. Interviewed you in the past, all the way back, I believe, probably in February 2018. I saw you in a show in Baltimore in January. You were touring on the second Cowboy and Frenchman album, Bluer Than You, and then you were working on Heritage. That didn't come out yet, but I did get a copy of it. So we did a 1-2 interview, and we released it. Since then, things have changed for you. You were East Coast, now you're West Coast. And in Oregon, you are working at a Portland State University. How's that going?
It's going great. This is my first, entree into classroom teaching, and that's been really interesting. I'm teaching classes that I really like: jazz arranging, jazz theory, jazz ear training, working with a combo. So that's been really, a great way to support the, creative activities that I enjoy doing as well, recording and performing.
I'm hearing loves and hates about Portlandia. What's going on with Oregon in your perspective as an outsider looking in?
I have to tell you that I still, it's been about a year and I still feel very new. So I don't know a lot of the kind of subtleties of the political dynamics here, but Portland was kind of at the center of a lot of attention, particularly in 2020. And I think it kind of got a lot of bad attention that was not really warranted. I think a lot of the things that were active here were active in a lot of other parts of the country. But I don't think it's unfamiliar to a lot of the major cities around the country. In the last year, I've really enjoyed being here. It's a really wonderful place to live. I'm kind of living in the downtown area, so that kind of scratches the itch coming from New York. And then, and if you go in 15 minutes in any direction, you're in some really beautiful nature. So, just kind of getting all of the best parts of life, I think, for me.
The album that we're talking about today is Hodges Front and Center Volume 1. It was just released on October 14th. We're doing this interview today on October 21st. So you're going to be on the East Coast again, because on the 25th of this month, you're going to be at Blues Alley in DC. So you are going to probably just hop on a plane really soon and start crisscrossing the country. The album was released on Outside in Music. That's a little different than the crowdsourcing platform that you had before. Do you feel that crowdsourcing after the pandemic is a little harder to achieve?
That's an interesting question. It's not one that I've really reckoned with yet. Outside In, I've had a wonderful relationship with them. All three of the Cowboys and Frenchmen albums came out on Outside In Music. It's run by a good friend, Nick Finzer. With this project, which had a smaller budget, more manageable budget than Heritage, which is a larger ensemble, I felt like I could do this on my own without kind of relying on the crowdsourcing methods that ArtistShare is kind of founded on. Yeah, so I haven't really had an opportunity to kind of dig into the crowdsourcing side of things. I do. I mean, just hypothetically, I kind of imagine it would be. Everyone's kind of, that we're witnessing kind of a flood of music that everyone's been cooking up in the last few years. How do you invest in all of the music that's being made? That said, on the flip side of the coin, I think everyone kind of is also everyone has been also forced to kind of recognize the value of live music and recorded music, and so it's the other side of that is that it's very possible that people are willing to invest in this creative process.
I have one comment about Johnny Hodges is the pure tone and economy and melody. Let's talk about him a little. What was the reason for you to use him as a guide for this album?
Well, you've nailed it. That, his tone and as you put it, the economy of melody. What a great phrase. Those two elements of his playing have been an inspiration for me since I was a teenager. I first started really digging into Johnny Hodges when I was in high school at the Douglas Anderson School of the Arts in Jacksonville, Florida. We were preparing for the Essentially Ellington competition, which that band went on to win. That whole band really dove deep into Ellington's band, and I was sitting in the lead outro chair, so of course I was paying particularly close attention to Johnny Hodges, his style of playing, his style of leading, his style of improvising, all again in the context of large ensemble playing. A few years later, I was introduced to the two small group albums he co-led with Ellington called Back to Back and Side by Side. That kind of introduced me to Hodges in more of a small group context as more of a band leader, and stepping more into a band leader role there, as the album title suggests, Back to Back and Side by Side with Ellington there. I went to college. I dove deep into other players. I expanded my own musical horizons, but Hodges was always kind of a primary influence for me. I wanted to kind of go deeper into this side of his playing that I don't think is as well known. I think everyone, if you know the name Johnny Hodges, you know it in association with Ellington. But he did so much great work as a band leader in his own right. And I really wanted to highlight that because I think there were some really interesting projects. One of my favorites being his record with Jerry Mulligan. Half of what I do is on Barry. And so those are, two of my favorite players on one record.
See if I'm correct with this. Okay, so he worked with Duke from 1928 to 1951, took a break from 1951 to 1956, came right back just in time for the Duke Ellington at Newport, which was just blew Duke Ellington back up as a major force in the jazz world. In the 1928 to 1951, Duke was a commercial jazz artist. He was making hits. So the type of music very accommodating to the public because they were actually like big hits, and he was a part of that. I think people will look back at his career and go, well, he's not blowing it out, like a Coltrane, or he's not blowing it out like a Parker. There's a reason for it. He was kind of the blueprint for all that, and then they built on top. So the avant-gardeness wasn't there yet, and he came back in the fold from 1956 until he died in 1970. So we're looking at an artist that has passed already 52 years. And we're looking at his career as like a diamond. Like this dude was Slash for Guns N' Roses. He was the other hand of Duke Ellington. So you have to put it in that perspective. Like they always say that Duke always creates music for an artist who's on his roster that's amazing. But I would also say that Billy Strayhorn was creating music with him in mind also. Did I get that right at all?
100%, 100%. I mean, Strayhorn is such an important ingredient in that mix of music and the musicians involved. You wouldn't have that band without Strayhorn.
Yeah, exactly. He is he would be the Bernie Taupin of the Elton John. So what was the reason for the split? There is a split between 1951 and 56, and he came right back, and the dynamics of what Duke Ellington were changed, and it became more of like instead of making hits, they were making history. They were creating a body of work and presenting it like every single night. Do you know what the reason was why he just said, "Hey, I'm taking some time off"?
As far as I know, it was not personal. There's not a personal riff or anything. I think Hodges wanted to explore his own career. You know, I think he had been working with Ellington for so long and enjoying it. Most of the musicians in that band included, you know, a lot of artists just want to see what they can do on their own and pursue their own creative interests. And I think that was an opportunity for Hodges to do so.
I mean, it was also, you know, the emergence of rock and roll was coming. Things were changing, the dynamics. He started recording, he recorded 42 albums as a leader between 46 and 1970, obviously. So he was able to stretch out. That was never an issue. And also, you know, some of the solo albums had that plug of Duke Ellington, or Mercer Ellington was there. Billy Strayhorn was on a lot of those solo albums between the 51. So the marriage was there. So it never really went away. It was just kind of curious if there was kind of a riff and it's coming back. It's always just makes for a better story. We're going to do 4 songs we're going to talk about in the intro of this. Take the A Train. So we're playing that ahead of time. The other songs that I picked out was Royal Garden Blue, and that's an old Dixieland song from 1919. And it's one of the first popular songs that was based on a riff. That is an obscure song to pick. And that's what I like about this album is you could have I mean, you're Duke Ellington, 50 million hits. You went in and dug in a little deeper and pulled out things that I think will surprise the listener.
I hope so. Particularly kind of growing out of those 2 records that inspired me, the, you know, back to back and side by side. There are a lot of tunes that follow the blues form on those records. Or I wanted to be kind of intentional in including not only records from Hodges' other collaborations beyond Ellington, but also try and curate an interesting collection of song forms. And so, you know, a lot of these other projects that involved other composers like Strayhorn and Jerry Mulligan, Clark Terry wrote some music. I was able to, you know, draw on a really deep well of interesting songs, kind of paint a really well-rounded portrait of Johnny Hodges.
Yeah, the album's called Volume 1, so we only assume that there's going to be a Volume 2. And we hope so. We're going to play a sample of the Royal Garden Blue. And the next song actually on the album is Viscount. So a Viscount is a European like nobility ranking, you know, similar to like a knight or esquire or a baron. Found on the 1957 The Big Sound, Hodges and Ellington men. And Billy Strayhorn played piano on this track. This is a hot song. This is something I wasn't familiar with. Do you have anything to talk about on this song?
Well, one thing that I think is really interesting is that this does fall into kind of the blues form. But one thing that I think makes this a unique composition and a unique track is that halfway through the tune, before you really get to the solo section, the tune modulates from the key of F to B flat. And it does so, you know, in a really slick way. So you don't really notice that modulation. It kind of, it's a really effective change, and it adds this subtle color change that I think keeps things fresh for the listener and sets it apart from the other blueses on those original records and also the other blueses that appear on Hodges front and center.
The next track is 18 Carats for Rabbit. And I was reading, and then I couldn't find it, that like they call Hodges a rabbit because he just stands there. He just kind of plays his instrument, and he like side view or something. He looks like a rabbit. Now, this song is from 1960. It's the Jerry Mulligan meets Johnny Hodges. Did I make that up? Like, where did that come from?
No, so there are actually 2 working theories as to Hodges' nickname, the Rabbit. One of them is that Hodges is, you know, when he plays, he's extremely stoic, and so that stoicism people, you know, often associate with a rabbit, or that's how that connection got made. The other operating theory is that rumor has it that when venues would provide Ellington's band with dinner, Hodges would request just lettuce, just plain lettuce.
Yeah.
And so that's another possible source of that nickname.
And that's weird. You get a free meal and you ask for lettuce. That's not asking for much. So the last song on the album is Ballad for a Very Sad and a Very Tired Lotus Eaters. Now, I went back and I said, oh, is this a part of the Lotus Eater poem that they're coming up with? The spelling is different. The song is coming from Dukes in Bed. It's 1957. Now this is a hot song. This is, it's not the riff. It's definitely melodic. It simmers the whole way through.
This is just another great example of Billy Strayhorn's beautiful, beautiful ballad writing, and one that just works so well for Johnny Hodges' voice. The harmony, I think, is so interesting and so hauntingly beautiful, and I think the tune stands in kind of perfect contrast to the rest of the record, which is just a collection of really joyful music. This too has a really wonderful warmth about it, but the harmony just stands in such great contrast to the rest of the songs on this record.
Definitely. Yeah. This is something that I will be playing for years. Yeah. This is like a thank you, because I'm in love with this song.
Thank you, Tom.
Yeah. Well, you're welcome. Hey, do you feel that this has anything to do with the poem, or am I making this up? The Lotus Eater.
I think that theme kind of comes up in Strayhorn's song titles a few times, so I think it's perfectly reasonable to assume that there's a connection there.
Yeah, I mean, even the title is very obscure. Owen Broder, it's great chatting with you again, and thank you for joining me today on Something Came from Baltimore.
Tom, thank you. It's great talking to you.